Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I had always enjoyed the unique experience of Airbnb compared to generic hotels. But after this trip, I think I'll be sticking with traditional hotels when I travel from now on. My husband and I booked a quaint countryside cottage for a weekend getaway. The online photos showed charming wood-beam ceilings, a lush garden, clawfoot tub. It looked perfect for a peaceful, relaxing retreat, and the reviews unanimously raved about its coziness and beautiful natural surroundings. When we arrived, the cottage seemed just as pictured and described. Vintage furniture, fresh wildflowers in vases, big windows overlooking the rolling hills. It felt wonderfully homey and idyllic. The host had even left a thoughtful welcome basket along with a note encouraging us to unwind, soak in the scenery, and make ourselves completely at home. That first evening we settled in, prepared a nice dinner together, and opened a bottle of wine. But around 9 p.m., I started noticing a faint but unpleasant odor. At first I assumed it was just the unfamiliar smells of an old country home, but the stench grew into something more offensive, like spoiled food or stagnant water. I checked the kitchen trash and fridge, but neither seemed to be the culprit. As the evening progressed, the smell persisted and became more pungent, almost like rotting garbage. We began searching room to room trying to determine the source, wondering if a small animal had found its way to the walls or attic and died. But we couldn't pinpoint exactly where the odor originated. Eventually, we realized the odor seemed most potent around an antique wardrobe in the corner of the living room. When we opened the doors, though, we found only musty old coats and hats that emitted a typical mothball scent. Nothing to explain the rotting stench. After a thorough search, we puzzled over the elusive smell, but gave up hunting for the source. Exhausted from travel, we went to bed hoping it would clear up by morning. However, the next day the stench remained, if not stronger. We were again hit with a wall of odor whenever we approached that wardrobe. My husband and I examined it closely, looking for gaps or openings where an animal could have crawled inside and died. But we found nothing. The wardrobe seemed totally sealed and intact. What on earth could be causing such an overpowering, nauseating smell? Just then my husband noticed the back panel inside the wardrobe seemed slightly loose and uneven. He gave it an experimental push, and it shifted, clearly not secured firmly into place. Immediately the foul stench grew stronger, wafting out from the back of the wardrobe and making us gag. There was definitely a false wall hiding something behind that wardrobe. Though hesitant, our curiosity won out over caution. My husband slowly dislodged the panel, which opened up to reveal a dark cavity inside leading into the wall. We reeled back from the overwhelming, nightmarish smell pouring out. Eyes watering, we stared at each other in shock. What had we uncovered? Though my instincts screamed no, I couldn't fight the morbid urge to shine my phone flashlight into the opening. Inside was a small hidden room built into the space between walls. It was filled with dusty old boxes, construction materials, and plenty of cobwebs, but no clear source of the rotten odor was visible. We were thoroughly confused and unnerved. Why was this secret room concealed behind the wardrobe? We knew we had to get out of that cottage immediately. We hastily grabbed our belongings and left, driving away from the property as quickly as possible. We were both too overwhelmed and freaked out to think to call the police right away. We just had to distance ourselves from whatever bizarre situation we had stumbled into. After we felt like we had put enough miles between us and the cottage, we pulled over, still reeling. We tried to make sense of what had happened. Who set up that hidden room, and for what purpose? And where was that nightmarish stench coming from? The whole experience was beyond unsettling. In hindsight, we clearly should have contacted the authorities right away. But in our panicked state, our main thought was getting as far away as we could. We convinced each other the whole thing was probably just some twisted prank by previous guests that the host had no knowledge of. There was no use dragging ourselves further into something so bizarre and unexplainable. We resolved to just try and forget the traumatic event and chalk it up to an eerie travel story. But of course, that was easier said than done. For weeks after, we remained paranoid that we were being watched or tracked down by whoever had crafted that hidden room. We constantly looked over our shoulders everywhere we went, half expecting to be followed. Gradually, we managed to mostly put the cottage incident out of mind, writing it off as a creepy anomaly we happened to get caught up in. We were too embarrassed now to go to the police with such a wild story. We convinced ourselves the whole thing was likely just some bizarre misunderstanding that we blew out of proportion due to paranoia. Still, an unsettled feeling lingered whenever we recalled that hidden foul-smelling space. Months later, though, we received shocking news that changed everything. A young woman staying at that very same cottage had gone missing shortly after checking in, seemingly vanishing into thin air. The police were investigating the property and host for any clues or connection to the guest's mysterious disappearance. When they interviewed other recent lodgers for leads, I knew we had to finally speak up about the deeply disturbing experience we had there. It felt like an enormous weight lifted off my shoulders to get the whole story out, and to potentially help authorities and the poor woman's family gain some kind of insight into what had happened inside that cottage. I was so excited for our weekend getaway. My boyfriend Tom and I had booked this cute little cabin in the mountains that we found on Airbnb. It looked absolutely perfect in the photos, rustic but modern, with a beautiful stone fireplace and the windows looking out over the trees. The drive up took a few hours, but it was so nice to get out of the city. As we got closer to the cabin, the cell service started cutting in and out. By the time we pulled up the driveway, our phones had no signal at all. I figured it was just part of being in such a remote area, a nice change of pace from our busy lives. When we pulled up to the cabin, it was just as charming as it looked online. There was a huge wraparound porch with rocking chairs, and the surrounding property was densely wooded, giving it a real secluded feel. We lugged our bags inside and looked around the cozy living room and kitchen. The decor was simple but tasteful, like something out of a magazine. As we explored the place, I was impressed by how clean and tidy everything was. The host had left little welcome baskets with snacks and bottled water, which I thought was such a nice touch. This was already shaping up to be such an amazing weekend. The first day we went hiking and explored the nearby town, but we were excited to get back to the cabin and spend the evening relaxing by the fireplace. Once it got dark, I noticed a faint blinking light coming from the bookcase in the corner. I walked over to inspect it and was shocked to find a tiny camera lens hidden between the books. My heart started racing as I frantically looked around for more cameras. And that's when I saw them. A camera tucked above the TV, another near the window, and one facing the bedroom. I felt like I was going to vomit. We were being watched this entire time. I ran to get Tom, panicked. He was incredulous at first, but once he saw the cameras himself, he turned white as a ghost. Who would do such a thing? And how would they spy on us from afar? We felt so disgusted and violated. We didn't know what to do. Part of us wanted to get out of there immediately, but it was pitch black outside and we had no cell service. We realized we were trapped there at least for the night. Tom wanted to rip the cameras down right away, but I convinced him that might make things worse. What if the host was unstable? We decided our best option was to pretend we didn't know about the cameras, but neither of us would sleep that night. We anxiously stayed up, keeping the lights on, acting normal in case we were being watched, but every creak of the old house made us jump. I kept imagining someone lurking outside. Tom kept looking out the window into the dark woods surrounding us. At one point he thought he saw a shadowy figure standing behind a tree, but it was too dark to tell. We barely spoke all night, just held each other in horror and disbelief at the nightmare we were living. As soon as the sun rose, we quickly packed up and left. I've never been so relieved to be back on the main road. We felt so shaken by what had happened that we drove all the way home without stopping once. The next day, we reported the Airbnb host to the police. After an investigation, they found the storage room in the man's house filled with monitors playing live footage from cameras he had installed not only in the cabin, but in other properties he rented out. The police said we weren't the first guests he had spied on. It still makes my skin crawl to think about being watched that entire weekend. I'll never feel safe staying at an Airbnb again. Looking back, there were a few small signs something was off. The host had emphasized multiple times in our messages how private the property was. At the time, I thought it was just showing off the secluded setting. Now I realize he wanted to highlight that no one would see what happened there. I also remember noticing fresh blankets in the closet, as if he was used to providing new sets for each guest. Why didn't I pick up on those red flags? I guess I was too caught up in the idea of a perfect weekend getaway. If only I had paid more attention to those details instead of just seeing what I wanted to see. The police ended up finding tapes dating back years, showing this man had long been violating people's privacy. I still have no idea what he did with those recordings or if they ended up on the dark web. The whole thing is like something out of a horror movie. Tom and I don't talk about that weekend anymore, but it will haunt me forever. I'll never look at Airbnb the same way. You really don't know who you're dealing with or what their motives are. A beautiful listing online means nothing. There are sick people in this world taking advantage of trusting travelers. Always trust your instincts. That nagging feeling that something is off could just save you. I've learned that lesson the hard way. Now I'm a lot more cautious with who I rent from. At least my story can serve as a warning to others. But I'm still not satisfied knowing this man profited off spying on innocent people for years. He only got a slap on the wrist while the victims have to live with the emotional trauma. It scares me to think how easily someone could invade my privacy again. No place really feels sacred anymore after knowing what people are capable of. All I can do is be more vigilant and hope I never fall prey to another predator. But they are out there, hiding behind charming online listings, waiting for the next opportunity to violate someone. The world feels a little darker knowing that. I hate that this experience tainted my faith in people, but how can you trust after living through a nightmare like that? I'm still putting the pieces of my sense of security back together. For my friend Amy's 30th birthday, a bunch of us were planning a fun weekend getaway to celebrate. Since there were 8 of us going, we figured renting an Airbnb would be way better than trying to cram into a few hotel rooms. I browsed listings for a couple hours until I found the perfect place. A 4-bedroom cabin rent on a lake about 2 hours outside the city. The photos showed big porches with rocking chairs overlooking the water. It looked so cozy and peaceful. The ideal spot for a weekend with friends. We made plans to drive up Friday evening after work. The closer it got to the trip, the more excited we all were for a break from our busy lives. I had a stressful week at my job, so I was really looking forward to kicking back at the cabin. Amy kept messaging me cute ideas for how we could decorate for her birthday dinner. Finally, Friday afternoon arrived, and we loaded up 2 cars and headed out, blasting Amy's favorite tunes. The gravel road leading to the cabin was pitch dark and winding, making it seem even more secluded. But when we pulled up and saw the twinkling lights along the porch, I knew we had picked the right place. We hauled our bags inside, claimed rooms, popped open some wine, and headed straight out to the dock to enjoy the moonlit view. The first night we barbecued on the patio and hung out by the fire pit making s'mores. It felt so good to be away from the daily grind and relax together. We ended up chatting under the stars until nearly 3 a.m. before finally heading to bed. The next morning, we made a big breakfast spread and spent the day out on the lake paddleboarding, swimming, and soaking up the sun. That evening, we threw together a birthday feast for Amy, complete with decorations and cake. We toasted to 30 and danced to her favorite songs. It was the perfect celebration. We were all exhausted from a full day in the sun and turned in early that night, which is when things started getting weird. I had just dozed off around midnight when my phone dinged with a text. Still half asleep, I checked it and saw an unknown number had sent me a message that just said, "Leave now." At first I thought I was just dreaming, but when I looked again, the strange message was still there. I texted back, "Who is this?" but got no reply. Just as I was about to wake my friends, another message from the same number popped up saying, "You shouldn't have come. Get out before it's too late." I started freaking out. How did this person get my number and know I was here? I quickly made sure all my social media accounts were still private. Then I ran to wake everyone and figure out what was going on. But oddly, none of my friends had gotten any odd messages. We checked all the locks and looked around outside with flashlights, but saw nothing amiss. Still, those messages really freak us out. We decided to just try and get some sleep, thinking it was probably just some stupid prank. But every little noise that night made us jump. And around 3 a.m., I got another text from the unknown number. "This is your last warning. Leave immediately." At that point, we were utterly terrified. Someone clearly knew we were there and wanted us gone. We'd all packed up our stuff as fast as we could. As we were hurrying to the cars, my phone dinged again. The message just said, "It's too late for you," and my blood ran cold. We drove away from that cabin like a bat out of hell, everyone shaken. As soon as we got back into cell service, I called the Airbnb host in a panic, but weirdly he seemed totally unaware of the scary texts I had gotten. He said none of it made any sense and that we were his first renters in a while. I didn't know what to believe. Were the messages just some deranged prankster who managed to get my number, or was the host just covering his tracks? Amy's birthday celebration had become tainted by this unsettling experience, and we just wanted to put it behind us. In the light of day, the whole thing seemed bizarre. I tried tracing the number, but it was from an internet texting app, so I reached a dead end. I kept racking my brain trying to think of how anyone could have known we were at that cabin, but came up blank. We filed a report with the police just in case, but they found no signs of break-ins or anything sinister at the property. My friends all thought I should change my number and forget the creepy texts, but something in my gut told me this was more than just a prank. The messages had felt so personal, like someone was watching us and knew exactly how to get under our skin. I decided to drive up to the cabin one day on my own while it was vacant. I don't know what I hoped to find, but I needed to get some sense of closure. As soon as I pulled up the winding drive, my heart started racing. I walked slowly through each room, looking for any sign of hidden cameras or someone having been there uninvited, but everything seemed perfectly normal. Out on the porch, I stared out at the calm lake, searching for answers, but the placid scene revealed nothing. Disappointed but not surprised, I got back in my car, more puzzled than before. I now hesitated to book any more remote Airbnb. Who knows what kind of places or people you could encounter? My sense of safety felt shaken. For weeks, I kept double-checking the locks at night in my own apartment. I couldn't stop thinking about those eerie messages and who could have sent them. In some ways, I wish we had stayed and tried to figure out who was behind the messages instead of running scared. But in the moment, getting out of there seemed safest. We will never know if it was just someone messing with us, or if there was real danger lurking at that cabin by the lake. The optimist in me wants to believe it was all just a stupid prank, but there was an undeniable sinister edge to those messages that still gives me chills. I don't think I'll ever book another remote Airbnb again without wondering if we're being watched the whole time. As much as I try to tell myself it was random, something about this just felt personal in a way I can't explain. Whoever was behind those messages knew exactly how to terrify us and ruin what was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway. Instead, the memory of that night will haunt me for a long time. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.